When did time become a fact? Why did religion dictate the measurement of time? Why is the Catholic Church's Gregorian calendar now accepted by 90% of the world, albeit a secularized version of the Gregorian calendar? Why is BC and AD now in tandem with BCE and CE, except BCE and CE still mark the same dates as BC and AD, but with an atheistic goal? What we know as the Gregorian calendar has only been in use for roughly 500 years, but we do know exactly what dates and events happened prior to the Church's calendar reform, thanks to the previous calendar, which is still in use in some cultures, the Julian calendar. This was introduced, of course, by Julius Caesar in 46 BCE, and it assumed a year length of 365.25 days, implemented by adding a leap day every 4 years. And this is still the liturgical calendar of most Eastern Orthodox institutions, which explains their proclivity to celebrate Christmas in early January. The reason why the Julian calendar was abandoned in the West is simple. Over some centuries, the calendar slipped relative into the seasons. By the 1500s, the calendar was about 10 days ahead. And the spring equinox, crucial for calculating Easter, was occurring around March 11th instead of March 21st. In 325 CE, the Council of Nicaea established that Easter should be celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. The equinox was fixed for ecclesiastical purposes as March 21st, and well, you get the problems that came with this. Medieval scholars were well aware of the issue. Roger Bacon, in the 13th century, warned of the growing error. Astronomers in Islamic and other parts of Christendom already had more accurate solar measurements. The reform was finally enacted by Pope Gregory VIII, hence the name the Gregorian calendar. Key contributors to this included Aloysius Lilius, or Luigi Lilio, a Calabrian physician and astronomer who designed the leap year system. Christopher Clavius, also a Jesuit mathematician who defended and explained the reform. Most non-papal European nations resisted adopting the calendar after this implementation. This included England, which did not even adopt the Gregorian calendar until 1752, while skipping 11 days. And Sweden didn't even fully align until 1753. Russia didn't even recognize the Gregorian calendar until 1918. Greece, not even until 1923. Now, moving on into the Islamic world, the Islamic Hijri calendar was created in the 7th century Common Era as a purely lunar system. And this was rooted in Arabian practices and formally organized under the early Islamic caliphates. But unlike the Gregorian calendar, it was not designed to track the solar year, but to regulate religious life. Before Islam, Arabs already used lunar months based on the visible new moon, and this is why they often refer to the crescent moon as their symbol of faith, partially. Also partially they stole it from the Byzantines. But the Islamic calendar is measured from the Hijra, Muhammad's migration from Mecca to Medina. Currently in 2025, we are in the Islamic year 1446 AH. AH stands for after Hijra, which in Latin means Anno Hijrae, which also means the year of the Hijra. The calendar does not start on the day Muhammad arrived in Medina. Instead, 1 Muharram, 1 AH, was fixed retroactively, is the beginning of the era. The date corresponds to July 16th, 622 CE. In the Julian calendar, but in our own calendar it is July 19th, 1622 CE. And as the verse in the Quran says, "Indeed, the number of months ordained by Allah is 12, in Allah's record since the day He created the heavens and the earth, of which 4 are sacred." But there were other proposed calendars for the Islamic system. And the Islamic calendar was formally instituted by the Caliph of Umar ibn al-Khattab. The problem? Well, a governor complained that official letters had no clear year, only a month's name. The solution, the Council of Companions, debated, but they eventually came to the conclusion that the Hijra ought to be where the Muslims mark the most important years since. Now, the Council of Companions debated which event should mark year one: Muhammad's birth? Was it first revelation? Death? So it was a best clear and political turning point to choose the Hijra. For some reason, perhaps to denote how Islam first started to spread. Moving on even further to the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is one of the oldest and continuously used calendars, and it is lunar solar, meaning it is carefully designed to reconcile lunar months with the solar year, so that religious festivals stay in their proper seasons. Some festivals must occur in specific seasons. Passover, for example, must be in the spring, the month of Aviv, as is stated in Exodus 13:4. Sukkot is tied to the autumn harvest. Now, this does create tension because lunar months are only 354 days. A solar year is 365 days. Now, without adjustment, holidays would drift, as is apparent in the Islamic calendar. The Jewish calendar starts all the way at the creation of the world, Anno Mundi AM. And in the rabbinic chronology, this date of creation is placed in 3761 BCE in Gregorian standards. So that means that the Gregorian year 2025 is equal to AM 5785 to roughly 5786. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the Roman repression caused the central Judaic authority to collapse, and observational methods became impractical for the dispersed peoples. Now, as tradition holds it, Hillel II formalized a calculated calendar, and this made the rules public so communities could remain synchronized. And whether he invented it or merely published existing rules is debated, but by late antiquity the system was fixed. 12 months, normally 13 in leap years, and the Jewish years are Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shevat, and Adar, or second Adar in leap years. 7 leap years every 19 years, Metonic cycle. Leap years add Adar 2, and the leap years are the years with 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, and Rosh Hashanah is never allowed to fall on a Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, and these rules ensure Yom Kippur doesn't abut the Sabbath, but ritual logistics remain manageable. The average year is 365.2468 days, and they drift about one day every 200 years. So it is less accurate than Gregorian time, but sufficient for ritual purposes. Now, to leave you with the knowledge of pre-Abrahamic calendars, here's some little facts about the Greek, Persian, and Chinese calendars. Ancient Greece never had one unified calendar. Each city-state, or polis, maintained its own, though they shared structural ideas. Months began with new moon observation, years about 354 days, and corrected with intercalary months. Athens had best kept records of this, Sparta not so much. The Persian calendar was so accurate to our own today that it's only about 5 days off from our own calendar, with an extra 5 Gatha days. But there's no leap day, so there's slow seasonal drift still used liturgically by Zoroastrians that remain. The Chinese calendar is among the most complex ever devised. It is lunar solar, but the months begin with astronomical new moon. So the solar terms divide the year into 24 segments. Now, the leap months inserted when a lunar month lacks a major solar term, no fixed cycle like the Jewish calendar. A year's length is common to be somewhere between 353 days to 355 days, and leap days include 383 days to 385 days. Now, year naming systems is something that the Chinese have. This is a sexagenary cycle, which is a 60-year cycle. The combination of 10 heavenly stems and 12 earthly branches. China never fixed a universal creation date, and time was cyclical, renewed by mandate of heaven, and not linear toward an end. And I guess in the end, a calendar is inherently tied to human efficiency. Most people in history never had any knowledge of how old they were or how many days or years ago tragedy was. It must have felt that life was that much more existential for the early days of Homo sapiens sapiens. I'm Jacksistential, always thanking you for watching.